Be Attentive, Series 11. Volume 27, September 28, 1929. All creation was brimful with divine charisms to give them to creatures, and my humanity received everything, giving in return, so as to give vent to so many kisses repressed, embraces rejected, and love unrecognized for so many centuries. In fact, since my divine will was not reigning, man was incapable of receiving the good that my will itself had placed in all creation, and my humanity, possessing my same divine will, gave it the first outlet, and received and gave the requital for everything that my same divine will had placed in all creation. And so this is why, as I would go outside, all created things would make feast, and competing with one another, they would give me what they possessed. Therefore be attentive, and take to heart only living in my divine will, if you want to feel vividly what your Jesus tells you about my supreme fiat. Volume 27, October 7th, 1929. Now, my daughter, your living in my divine fiat began with our asking for your will, that you most willingly gave me. And when I saw you give me your will, I felt victorious, and breathing into you, I wanted to pronounce my omnipotent fiat in the depth of your soul, to renew the act of creation. This fiat I repeat always, in order to give you continuous life from it, and as it is repeated, it preserves you and maintains its life in you. This is why you often feel me breathe into you, renewing your soul, and the inseparability I feel is my divine will that makes me love, with perennial love, what we have deposited in you. Every time my fiat is repeated, each of its truths that it manifests to you, each of its knowledges or words that it speaks to you, is a love that arises in us to love you more and to make itself loved. It is our creating and preserving fiat that, loving its life and what it has done in you, keeps pronouncing itself in order to preserve its life and the beauty of its work. Therefore be attentive to receive continuously the word of my fiat, for it is bearer of creation, of life, and of preservation. Volume 27, October 21st, 1929. And just as I did not depart for heaven, but in the exile I remained in the midst of creatures, only with my divine mother and with Saint Joseph, who knew me very well, and I formed their paradise on earth, while for the others it was as if I did not exist. In the same way, having formed its life in you, with all the cortege of its knowledges, if it does not receive the effects, the purpose for which it has made itself known, how can my fiat depart? In fact, when we decide to do a work, a good, no one can move us. Therefore, in spite of the exile and of its hiddenness, just as I did, doing my public life and making myself known after 30 years of hidden life, so will my divine volition not be able to remain always hidden, but will obtain its intent of making itself known in order to reign in the midst of creatures. Therefore be attentive and know how to appreciate the great gift of my divine will in your soul. Volume 27, November 30th, 1929. So the life of the love created by us in creating man remained without nourishment and almost dying. More so, since every human act he did without our divine will was as many nights that he formed in his soul. If he thought, it was night that he formed. If he looked, spoke, and so forth, everything was darkness that formed a dark night. Without my fiat, there can be neither day nor sun, at the most a few tiny little flames that can hardly guide his step. Oh, if they knew what it means to live without my divine will, even if they were not evil and did some good. The human will is always night for the soul that oppresses her, embitters her, and makes her feel the weight of life. Therefore be attentive, and let nothing escape you that does not enter into my divine fiat, that will make you feel the full day, that will give you back the order of creation. It will call back the harmony, that will place in force the continuous giving of your acts and the continuous receiving of your Creator. And embracing the whole human family, you will be able to impetrate that the order of the way in which they were created may come back, that the night of the human will may cease, and the full day of my divine will may arise. Volume 27, December 18th, 1929. Place your hand upon my heart and feel how strongly it beats, to the point that I feel it explode. Prick up your ears and hear how it seethes, almost like a stormy sea, that forming its gigantic waves, wants to overflow outside to invade everything and everyone. It wants to do its third race of ardor of love, and in this ardor of love, it wants to form the kingdom of my divine will. This ardor of love of ours will unite together that of creation and that of my incarnation, and will make them one. And it will be ardor of triumphing love, and will give its kiss of triumphant love, of conquering love, of love that wins over everything, to give its kiss of perennial peace, its kiss of light that will put to flight the night of the human will, and will make the full day of my divine will arise, that will be the bearer of all goods. How I long for it! Our love seethes so much within me that I feel the necessity to let it overflow outside. And if you knew what relief I feel when, pouring it out with you, I speak to you of my divine volition, the ardor of my love that gives me the delirious fever, calms down, and feeling refreshment I put myself at work so that all may be my will in your soul. Therefore be attentive, and let me do. Volume 27, December 25th, 1929. Here is the great reason for a story so long, and a speaking of mine so continuous. It will be in balance with everything that was done by us in creation, and with everything I did in redemption. And if it seems that sometimes I remain silent, it is not because I have ceased my speaking, but because I take rest. In fact, it is my usual way to rest in my very word and works that come out of me. Just as I did in creation, it was not pronounced always. I would say fiat, and I would pause, and then I would pronounce it again. So I do in you. I speak, I give you my lesson, and I take rest, first to enjoy in you the effects of my words. than to dispose you to receive the new life of my lesson. Therefore be attentive, and let your flight in my divine will be continuous. Volume 27, January 7th, 1930. Don't you know that the one who must live in our divine fiat must be a nimbus of heaven, such that as it lowers itself upon earth, but so much as to eliminate any distance, at that point of the earth where there is the fortunate creature, one must see heaven, not earth. Nor would my divine will be without its heaven. It itself would form it for itself, and the drapes of heaven would lower themselves to pay homage to that fiat from which they recognize their existence. Therefore all the blessed remain stupefied in seeing a nimbus of heaven upon earth. But their stupefaction ceases immediately when they see that the divine will that forms their heaven and all their happiness is present as reigning in that creature, precisely at that point where they see that the drapes of heaven, lowering themselves, surround that creature to sing the praises of my supreme fiat. Therefore be attentive, my daughter, and if I tell you this, it is to let you know the great gift of making my will known to you, and how it wants to form its kingdom in you, so that you may thank me and be grateful. Volume 27, January 16th, 1930. This is why, then, the one who lives in our fiat is our inseparable one. We feel her littleness flow in our power, and she fills herself with our power as much as she can, and honors our power, because she places it in the condition of communicating itself to the creature. We feel her flow in our beauty, and she fills herself with beauty in our love, and she fills herself with our love in our sanctity, and she remains filled with it. But while she remains filled, she honors us, because she places us in the condition of embellishing her with our divine beauty, of filling her with our love, of impressing our sanctity, in such a way as to place all our divine qualities in attitude. In a word, she puts us in the condition of operating and working hard to communicate ourselves to her, because it is not befitting for us to keep her in our divine will as dissimilar from us. She may be little, she cannot enclose all our divine being, but as for sharing with her all our divine qualities as much as it is possible for creature, in a way that nothing must be lacking to her, this is possible. Therefore, we want to deny her nothing, and besides, we would deny it to our divine will, and it would be like denying to our very selves what we ourselves want to do. Therefore be attentive, my daughter. In our fiat you will find the true purpose for which you were created, your origin, your divine nobility. You will find everything, will receive everything, and will give us everything. Volume 27, February 17th, 1930. My will restricts itself to enclose itself in the creature, while remaining immense, and victorious it forms its kingdom in her, making use of her as if she were its body, in which it palpitates, breathes, speaks, operates, and walks. Therefore the sorrow of my divine fiat, because creatures do not lend themselves to let it carry out all its operations in them, to let it reign, and they force it to silence and to inactivity, is incomprehensible. and with divine and unspeakable patience, it waits for those who must live in its will, so as to resume its speaking and its divine activity, to form its kingdom in the midst of creatures. Therefore be attentive, my daughter. Listen to the speaking of my divine fiat. Give it life in all your acts, and you will see the unexpected portents that my divine will shall do in you. Volume 28, April 1st, 1930. But do you know what the cause is of so much insistence of our love? To receive, in each thing that the creature may take, the encounter of her love. So the infinite love wanted to meet with the finite love, and form one single love, so as to place in the creature the balance of its love. And since the creature makes use of created things without even thinking that our love comes to meet her in the things that she takes, to hear our repeated refrain, I love you, I love you, and she makes use of them without having a glance for he who is sending them to her, the love of the creature remains unbalanced, because not meeting with our love, it loses the balance, and remains disordered in all its acts, because it has lost the divine balance and the strength of the love of its Creator. Therefore be attentive with your requital of love, to repair me for so much coldness of creatures. Then I continued making my round in the acts of the divine will, and I thought to myself, but what is the use for the so many times I make my round and make my round in the supreme fiat to follow its acts? And my sweet Jesus added, my daughter, all lives have need of nourishment. Without nourishment, a person neither forms nor grows. And if the nourishment is lacking, there is the danger that life may be taken away from him. Now following my will, uniting oneself to its acts, making her round, and making her round in it, serves to form the nourishment with which to nourish, form, and make its life grow in your soul. Its life can nourish itself with no other acts but those that are done in its will, nor can it form in the creature or grow if she does not enter into it. And by the union of her acts, it forms in her its birth of light, to form its life of divine will in the creature. And the more acts of divine will she forms, and the more she unites herself with its acts and lives in it, the more abundant food she forms to nourish it and make it grow more quickly within her soul. Therefore your making your round in it is life that it forms. It is nourishment that serves the development of the life of my divine will in your soul, and it serves to prepare the food to nourish my will in the other creatures. Therefore be attentive, and do not want to stop. Volume 28, April 18th, 1930. Now you must know that in order to call back to life again these goods in the creature, the one who would call back my fiat again into her soul was needed, and who would deny nothing to it, letting it dominate freely, so that it might administer to her again its vivifying and nourishing virtue, to call back to life the destroyed goods. And this is why my divine will, by subduing you, and by your letting yourself be subdued, has resumed its vivifying virtue in your soul, and calling you into its dwelling, it nourishes you in order to call back in you all of its goods. And all your acts that you do in it, You're making rounds upon rounds within its acts. You're asking continuously for its kingdom upon earth, are nothing other than nourishments that it gives you, and it constitutes the right for other creatures to be able to receive again the kingdom of my divine will with the life of all its goods. When I want to do a good to all creatures, I place the springing font of it in one creature. From this font I open many channels, and I give to everyone the right to take the goods that the font possesses. Therefore be attentive, and let your flight in my divine will be continuous. Volume 28, April 23rd, 1930. Then I continued making my round in the creation, and my always lovable Jesus added, "My daughter, see what order there is in the creation of the whole universe. There are heavens, stars, suns, all ordered. Much more so in creating man. Our divine being stretched out the order of our divine qualities like many heavens in the depth of his soul. So we stretched out in him the heaven of love, the heaven of our goodness, the heaven of our sanctity, of our beauty, and so on. And after we stretched out the order of the heavens of our divine qualities, our Fiat, in the vault of these heavens, constituted itself sun of the soul, that with its light and heat, reflecting itself in him, was to grow and preserve our divine life in the creature. And just as our divine qualities point out our supreme being, so do these heavens, stretched out in man, point out that he is our dwelling. Who can tell you the way? The love with which we delighted in creating man. Oh, if he knew who he is, what he possesses. Oh, how he would esteem himself more, and would be attentive not to stain his soul, and would love he who created him with so much love and grace. Volume 28, May 20th, 1930. My daughter, my divine will is the gatherer of everything that belongs to it. Jealous of its acts, it does not disperse a single one of them, because each of its acts contains an infinite act, one whole entire eternity, an interminability that never ends. Therefore they are acts not subject to being dispersed. And when my Fiat forms its acts, the love, the jealousy for its act is so great that it keeps it on its lap of light as glory and triumph of the power of its operating. Now, when the soul lives in my divine will and encloses her acts in it, she becomes an act of divine will, and then she repeats for herself all the acts that the divine will does, and she gives it the glory, the requital of its divine acts. And oh, how my divine Fiat feels triumphant of this creature, finding in her a pure act of its will, and it makes itself the gatherer of everything that this creature can do. It does not disperse even one breath, because in everything it finds its operating will, and this is enough in order for it to have acts worthy of it. And it loves her so much that it keeps her clasped in its lap of light, to give her the continuous life of its volition, and to receive from her the requital of it. Therefore, my daughter, be attentive to receive this life of divine will, so as to be able to say, "Life of divine will you give me, and life of divine will I give you." Volume 28, September 20th, 1930. Suppose that you want to do an act of love. Immediately I get down to work. I place in it my breath. I lay a dose of my love. I embellish it with the variety of the beauty it contains. And then, divine administrator of my will as I am, I administer my divine will upon that act of love, in such a way that in that act one no longer recognizes the act of the creature, but an act of love as if it had come out from the center of my divinity. I am very jealous of the acts that the creature wants to do as animated by my divine will. I do not admit any disparity between her acts and mine, and in order to have this, I must place of my own and my work, and this in all of her acts. If she wants to do acts of adoration, of prayers, of sacrifice, I place in them my work, so that her adoration may be the echo of the divine adoration. Her prayer may be the echo of mine. Her sacrifice may be the repeater of mine. In sum, I must find myself in each act of the creature. I, your Jesus, as the owner, possessor of my divine will, would not administrate it if I did not find the sanctity, the purity, the love of my humanity in the act of the creature. Therefore I want to find her clear of any clouds that might shadow my divine will. Therefore be attentive, my daughter. Do not hinder my work that I want to do in your soul. Volume 28, October 7th, 1930. It would not be decorous for our divine works to be entrusted to souls who are inconstant and not disposed to face any sacrifice for us. The sacrifice of the creature is the defense of our works, and it is like putting them in a safe place. So once we have found the faithful creature, and the work comes out of us to take its place in her, everything is done. The seed is already sown, and little by little it germinates and produces other seeds, such that, as they diffuse, whoever wants to can procure for himself that seed to make it germinate in his soul. Does the farmer not do the same? If he has the good of having one single seed that can be his fortune, he sows it into his field. That seed, by germinating, can produce 10, 20, 30 seeds, and the farmer no longer sows only one of them, but all those that he has reaped, and he returns to sow them over again until he is able to fill all his field, and he reaches the point of being able to give to others the seed of his fortune. Much more can I, celestial farmer, do, as long as I find a creature with the field of her soul prepared, in which I can sow the seed of my works. That seed will germinate, and little by little it will make its way. It will make itself known, loved, and desired by few, and then by many, that the celestial seed of my divine will be sown into their souls. Therefore, my daughter, be attentive and faithful. Allow that I may sow this celestial seed in your soul, and I may find no hindrance to let it germinate. If there is the seed, there is the sure hope that in germinating it can produce more seeds. But if the seed does not exist, all the hopes cease, and it is useless to hope for the kingdom of my divine will, just as it would have been useless to hope for redemption if the celestial queen had not conceived me as the fruit of her maternal womb, the fruit of her faithfulness, of her firmness and sacrifice. Therefore let me do, and be faithful to me, and I will take care of everything else. Volume 28, October 18, 1930. Now you must know that all the acts that are done in my divine will are inseparable from it. It can be said that they form one single thing, act and will. The will can be called light, the act heat, that are inseparable from each other. So all those who will possess my fiat as life will have in their power all the acts of the celestial Mamma, and she had in her power all of their acts, in such a way that in her kisses and embraces I felt myself kissed and embraced by all those who were to live in my will, and in them I feel myself being kissed again and embraced by my Mamma. Everything is in common and in perfect accord in my will. Each human act descends from its womb, and with its power it makes it rise back into the center from which it came out. Therefore be attentive, and let nothing escape you that does not enter into my divine will, if you want to give me everything and receive everything. You have reached the end of the Be Attentive series, volumes 27 and 28. Fiat.